The Last Laugh, a Galactic Legend's Mistake. Admiral Vrax K'Thorn was, quite frankly, the most insufferable genius the Galactic Union had ever produced. This wasn't just my opinion, it was carved into the monuments on 47 different worlds. Literally. The Jaxians had erected a 300-foot crystal obelisk that simply read K'Thorn, undefeated in letters large enough to be seen from orbit. Subtle, those Jaxians. When Vrax entered the grand reception hall of Nexus Station, the diplomatic hub of the entire Galactic Union, you could practically hear the collective intake of breath. He stood 7 feet tall with iridescent blue scales that shimmered under the station's artificial lighting. 4 arms, each capable of snapping a support beam, folded neatly behind his back as he strode forward with the confidence of someone who had never known defeat in his 157 cycles of existence. Make way for Admiral K'Thorn, Supreme Commander of the Galactic Fleet, hero of the Regelian conflict, destroyer of the Zenth Armada, and bearer of the Nova Cross, announced his aide, a trembling Vex with skin so pale it was nearly translucent. I should probably mention that nobody announces anyone anymore. It's the year 2487, not the Renaissance. But Vrax insisted on it, and nobody had the spine, figuratively or literally, in some species cases, to tell him no. Ambassador Groll, Vrax nodded to the gelatinous diplomat from Epsilon Eridani. Your negotiation tactics during the Mineral Rights Summit were adequate. Coming from Vrax, this was practically a marriage proposal. Groll's translucent body flushed a deep purple with pleasure. Vrax continued his imperial procession through the reception hall, dispensing backhanded compliments like a malfunctioning praise dispenser. Each recipient practically tripped over themselves thanking him for his generous assessment. The entire station had been upgraded for this summit, the first full gathering of Union species in a decade. The observation deck had been transformed into a reception hall, with viewports showcasing the swirling nebula beyond. Representatives from all 47 member species mingled, negotiated, and gossiped while pretending not to be terrified of the living legend in their midst. You see, Vrax K'Thorn wasn't just decorated, he was weaponized accolades. 12 major conflicts resolved under his command. 3 invasions thwarted before they began. A tactical genius so profound that the Galactic Academy had 17 courses dedicated to studying his battle maneuvers. The Zenth, a warrior race that literally evolved to conquer, had surrendered to him after a 40-minute conversation. Not a battle. A conversation. Admiral, squeaked the Nexus Station director, a Tyrellian with too many eyes and not enough backbone, we're so honored by your presence. The Strategic Committee meeting will commence in the Quantum Hall tomorrow at 0800 hours. Your accommodations have been prepared to your exact specifications. Vrax gave the director a look that could freeze hydrogen. I presume the secure quantum channels have been established as I requested? Why, yes, Admiral. Triple encrypted, just as you specified. Triple? Vrax raised what passed for an eyebrow. I specified quadruple encryption. I'll have it upgraded immediately. The director's extra eyes were blinking out of sync now, a sure sign of Tyrellian panic. That was Vrax in a nutshell. He didn't just expect perfection, he considered it the bare minimum requirement for existence in his vicinity. And the galaxy had collectively decided to enable this behavior because, well, his strategies had prevented at least 3 extinction-level conflicts in the past century alone. As the gathering proceeded, rumors swirled about why the Admiral had personally attended this summit. Some whispered that a new threat lurked beyond the Outer Rim. Others suspected power plays within the Union Council. But no one, absolutely no one, guessed it had anything to do with the newcomers to the galactic stage, humans. Lieutenant Commander Jack Russell stood in the corner of the reception, nursing what he hoped was the alien equivalent of whiskey, and trying to look like he belonged. He didn't. Humans had only joined the Galactic Union 15 Earth years ago, making them the newbies in a club where some species measured their membership in millennia. Jack was 35, with the kind of face that looked perpetually amused by a joke no one else had heard. His dark hair was cut to military precision, though one stubborn lock seemed determined to rebel. His dress uniform, crisp navy blue with silver trim, stood out amidst the various skins, scales, and exoskeletons surrounding him. First time at a Union gathering? Came a melodic voice to his left. Jack turned to see a Lemurian, essentially a humanoid figure composed of softly glowing light. They were renowned diplomats, largely because it was impossible to read their expressions, and thus project your own meaning onto them. Clever evolutionary adaptation, that. Is it that obvious? Jack smiled, extending a hand before remembering that Lemurians preferred not to touch. He smoothly transitioned the gesture into straightening his uniform. Lieutenant Commander Jack Russell, Earth Defense Force. Tella, third luminescence of the Lemurian collective, the being replied. And yes, it's quite obvious. You're standing as though expecting an attack, you've positioned yourself with a clear sight line to all exits, and you've been watching everyone as if cataloging threats. Jack laughed. Military habits die hard. Indeed, though I find humans fascinating. Your species has accomplished in decades what took others centuries. Some find it concerning. Concerning? We're just quick studies, Jack shrugged. Tella's glow pulsed slightly, the Lemurian equivalent of a thoughtful hum. Quick studies who managed to retrofit our FTL technology into weapons systems that even our engineers hadn't conceived of. Jack winced. That particular innovation had caused quite the diplomatic incident last year. Creative problem solving? That's one term for it, Tella replied. Others call it terrifying adaptability. The conversation was interrupted by a commotion near the center of the hall. The crowd parted like a sea before Admiral Vrax K'Thorn. Ah, Tella's light dimmed slightly, the living legend himself. Jack had studied K'Thorn extensively. Every military cadet on Earth did. The Admiral's battle strategies were required reading, though instructors often emphasized that his tactics worked specifically for him and shouldn't be attempted by, well, anyone else. Is he always so? Imperious? Intimidating? Insufferable? Offered Tella. I was going to say blue, but those work too. Tella's form brightened in what Jack had learned was Lemurian laughter. You might be my favorite human yet, Commander Russell. Jack watched as Vrax systematically worked the room, each interaction following the same pattern: approach, intimidate, offer conditional approval, accept groveling, move on. It was almost choreographed. Then the Admiral's 4 eyes locked onto Jack. The human felt like a mouse spotted by a particularly judgmental hawk. The human representative, Vrax announced, striding toward Jack with purpose. The crowd around them subtly expanded, creating an impromptu stage for whatever was about to happen. Jack straightened to attention, a human military gesture that Vrax almost certainly recognized but just as certainly did not care about. Admiral K'Thorn, Jack nodded respectfully. Your reputation precedes you. As does humanity's, replied Vrax, his voice like gravel wrapped in silk. Your species joins our union, and suddenly we have diplomatic incidents across 3 sectors. Jack maintained his diplomatic smile. Growing pains, Admiral. We're still learning galactic etiquette. Learning? Vrax's upper right arm made a dismissive gesture. Your kind doesn't learn, you bulldoze. You've advanced your military capabilities at an alarming rate. We've had to, Jack replied evenly. Earth has been attacked twice since first contact. Self-preservation is a strong motivator. Ah yes, the Krell incursion and the, what was it called? The Mars misunderstanding? A ripple of uncomfortable murmurs went through the assembled aliens. The Mars misunderstanding had been an unprovoked attack that killed 17,000 colonists. The diplomatic term misunderstanding had been coined by the Galactic Union, not by humans, who called it what it was, a massacre. Jack felt his diplomatic smile hardening. We prefer to be prepared. Prepared? Perhaps. Or perhaps humans simply have an unhealthy obsession with conflict, Vrax said, all 4 arms now clasped behind his back. Your species has been involved in more incidents in 15 years than most experience in a century of Union membership. Jack took a careful sip of his definitely not whiskey. We're enthusiastic participants, Admiral. So I've observed, Vrax replied coldly. I've read the reports about your Unusual tactics during the Proxima Centauri piracy suppression. My squad adapted to the situation, Jack said. The operation had been a success by any measure, though it had involved some creative use of garbage disposal units and food replicators that had made the Union Security Council deeply uncomfortable. Adapted. How very human. The way Vrax said it made it sound like a communicable disease. Tell me, Commander, do all humans share your disregard for established protocol, or are you a special case? The reception hall had gone quiet now. Jack was acutely aware that this conversation was being observed by diplomats who would report back to their respective worlds. First impressions mattered. I believe in achieving objectives, Admiral, Jack said carefully. Sometimes that requires thinking outside traditional parameters. An interesting euphemism for chaos, Vrax replied. But then your species is remarkably good at euphemisms. Like calling Lieutenant Maria Flores a hero rather than acknowledging her reckless incompetence. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees instantly. Several gasps rippled through the crowd, and at least 3 species began subtly moving toward the exits. Jack's face didn't change expression, but something in his eyes shifted like shutters closing over windows during a storm. I beg your pardon, Admiral? Vrax, apparently oblivious to the sudden tension, continued. Lieutenant Flores, your famous human hero who sacrificed herself during the Krell incursion. I've reviewed the tactical data. Her maneuver was unnecessary and poorly executed. A competent officer would have found a solution that didn't involve suicide. Tella, the Lumerian diplomat, had dimmed her luminosity to near invisibility, the equivalent of someone shrinking away from an impending disaster. Maria Flores saved an entire colony, Jack said, his voice unnervingly calm. 13,000 civilians, at the cost of a ship and crew that could have saved many more had they been properly deployed. Vrax dismissed. Emotional decision-making. A common human flaw. Jack set his glass down on a passing server's tray with exaggerated care. Lieutenant Flores was my friend, Admiral. Your friendship doesn't alter the tactical assessment, Vrax said. Perhaps if humans spent more time studying proven strategies instead of glorifying emotional martyrdom, you'd advance more quickly. The Tyrellian station director was frantically making abort gestures behind Vrax's back, which the Admiral either didn't see or chose to ignore. Maria Flores, Jack said, each word crisp and precise, was not only my friend. She was the finest officer I've ever served with. She made her decision with complete awareness of all tactical options, and she chose the only one that guaranteed civilian survival. Vrax made a sound that translated across species as dismissive scoffing. I've analyzed the encounter personally. There were at least 3 superior alternatives. From the comfort of your tactical room, perhaps, Jack replied. Maria was there. I was there. You weren't. I don't need to have been present to recognize incompetence masquerading as heroism, Vrax said. Your emotional attachment is clouding your professional judgment, Commander. Perhaps that's why humans remain tactically inferior. You can't separate feelings from facts. An Ozarian diplomat had begun recording the exchange surreptitiously. A Krell representative was backing away slowly, remembering all too well what had happened the last time their species had underestimated human emotional responses. Jack took a single step closer to the Admiral, not threatening but definitely eliminating any pretense that this was still casual conversation. I respect your accomplishments, Admiral, Jack said quietly, but you've crossed a line. Lines are conceptual constructs, Vrax replied, looming over the much shorter human. The facts are immutable. Lieutenant Flores failed in her duty to find an optimal solution. Her glorification says more about human psychological needs than tactical excellence. 3 security officers had materialized at the edges of the gathering, uncertain whether to intervene. Challenging a superior officer was a serious offense in the Union fleet, but this wasn't quite a military setting, and the human wasn't technically under Vrax's command. Admiral K'Thorn, Jack said, his voice carrying surprisingly well despite its measured tone, where I come from, we have a saying, don't speak ill of the dead. Where I come from, Vrax replied, we have a saying as well, truth outranks sentiment. Lieutenant Flores is celebrated because she died, not because her tactics were sound. Had she survived to face a proper review, the assessment would be quite different. Several of the gathered diplomats made various gestures of alarm or discomfort, depending on their physiologies. Even those unfamiliar with human culture could sense that something unprecedented was happening. Jack's next words came out with surgical precision. I formally challenge you to retract your statement about Lieutenant Maria Flores. Vrax's four eyes blinked in sequence, a rare display of genuine surprise. Challenge me? On what grounds? Defamation of character and disrespect to the honored dead, Jack replied. As is my right under Section 17 of the Galactic Charter regarding cultural dignity and remembrance. The Turellian station director looked like he might faint. Section 17 was rarely invoked. It was an ancient provision included when the Union was first formed, allowing for formal challenges when deep cultural values were violated. You cannot be serious, Vrax said, genuine incredulity in his voice. You're invoking an honor challenge over a tactical assessment? I'm invoking an honor challenge because you're smearing the name of a woman who can no longer defend herself. Jack corrected him. A woman who died saving thousands. A woman you never met, and whose final moments you completely misunderstand. This is absurd. Vrax looked around, clearly expecting support from the gathered dignitaries. To his visible surprise, many avoided his gaze. The Union took its cultural respect provisions seriously, even if they were rarely tested. Do you accept the challenge, Admiral? Jack asked. Or do you retract your statements regarding Lieutenant Flores? The crowd held its collective breath. Vrax K'Thorn had never backed down from anything in his long, decorated career. But neither had anyone ever formally challenged him using the Charter's ancient provisions. Vrax's scales darkened slightly, a sign of anger in his species. I do not retract facts, Commander. If you wish to waste the Union's time with antiquated honor protocols, so be it. I accept your challenge. The words hung in the air like a physical presence. A challenge had been issued and accepted between the Galactic Union's most decorated commander and humanity's sole representative at the most important diplomatic summit in a decade. The station director looked like he was calculating how quickly he could tender his resignation. This is unprecedented, muttered Counselor Zhen, a gas-based entity who had materialized beside the station director moments after Vrax and Jack had been escorted to separate diplomatic quarters. An honor challenge hasn't been invoked in 73 cycles. The emergency meeting of the station's governing council had been hastily convened in a secure chamber. Representatives from 12 species sat around a circular table, their various biological and mechanical translation devices creating a subtle hum in the background. Unprecedented and unnecessary, added Ambassador Drill of the Tauran Collective, his bovine features creased with concern. Admiral K'Thorn is essential to Union security. We cannot risk him in some primitive ritual. The Turellian station director looked ready to molt from stress. The challenge has been formally accepted. Under Section 17, we are obligated to proceed. What exactly does this entail? Asked a metallic voice. It belonged to Unit 7, representative of the Mechanoid Cooperative. My data banks contain limited information on Section 17 proceedings. An ancient Jurian, a species resembling a cross between a tortoise and a sequoia, activated the holographic display. Text in the Union's common script appeared in the center of the table. Section 17 provides for resolution of deep cultural conflicts through ritual contest, the Jurian explained, her voice creaking like old wood. The challenged party selects the nature of the contest, while the challenger sets the terms of victory. What kind of contest are we talking about? Drell demanded. Physical combat? The human would be obliterated. Admiral K'Thorn could select any form of competition, the Jurian confirmed. Physical, mental, strategic. The Charter leaves it open to accommodate diverse cultural practices. Meanwhile, in his temporary quarters, Jack Russell sat calmly at the edge of a curved sofa designed for a very different body type. Across from him stood Tella, the Lumarian diplomat, her glow subdued to a concerned flicker. You realize what you've done, don't you? She asked without preamble. Invoked an ancient right that nobody expected to be used, Jack nodded. Yes, I'm aware. K'Thorn has never lost at anything, Tella said. And you've just challenged the most decorated military mind in the Union to what will essentially be a public duel. Jack shrugged. He shouldn't have spoken about Maria that way. Tella's form flared briefly in frustration. Is this how humans always respond? With disproportionate escalation? Only when something truly matters, Jack replied, his calm demeanor unchanged. Maria saved my life, along with thousands of others. I won't let her memory be tarnished by someone who wasn't there. Tella floated closer. The Admiral will choose the contest format. He'll select something that guarantees his victory. Probably. Man. And you don't care? Jack finally smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. I care about winning. But I care more about standing up for what's right. Across the station, in a much larger suite, Admiral Vrax K'Thorn paced with military precision, all four of his arms clasped behind his back. This is a diplomatic disaster, his aide fretted, following several steps behind. The council is in emergency session now. Let them deliberate. Vrax dismissed. The challenge has been accepted. Union law is clear. But sir, to risk everything over a human's emotional outburst. Vrax spun with surprising speed. This is not about risk. This is about principle. The human challenged my tactical assessment, my expertise, my authority. Yes, Admiral, but... No. Vrax's scales shifted to a deeper blue, a warning sign. I will not withdraw. The human must learn that in the Union, facts and hierarchy matter more than sentiment. The aide swallowed audibly. What contest will you choose, sir? A cold smile spread across Vrax's face. Something educational. The human wants to defend his friend's tactical decisions? Then we shall recreate the scenario and let him demonstrate these supposed superior tactics himself. Back in the council chamber, the arguments had grown heated. We cannot allow this to proceed, insisted Drell. The political implications alone. We have no choice, interrupted the Jurian elder. Section 17 is fundamental to Union law. It enshrines the principle that cultural dignity transcends rank and species. If we override it for convenience, we undermine the very foundation of our alliance. The station director's multiple eyes darted nervously between counselors. The Admiral has submitted his choice of contest. All discussion ceased immediately. Well? Prompted Zen, their gaseous form swirling anxiously. The director activated a datapad. Admiral K'Thorn has selected a tactical simulation. Specifically, a recreation of the Krell incursion scenario in which Lieutenant Flores was killed. A collective murmur rippled through the chamber. That's unusually precise, noted Unit 7. And cruel, added Tella, who had just entered the chamber. The Admiral is forcing Commander Russell to relive his friend's death and potentially fail in the same scenario. Or prove his assertion that Flores made the only viable choice, countered the Jurian thoughtfully. Interesting. The station director looked ill. Commander Russell has already provided his victory conditions. Another expectant silence fell over the room. He has set only one condition, the director continued. That Admiral K'Thorn publicly acknowledged that his assessment of Lieutenant Flores was made without complete information and therefore cannot be considered definitive. That's surprisingly reasonable, Drell admitted reluctantly. Indeed, agreed the Jurian. The human doesn't demand an apology or retraction, merely an acknowledgement of epistemological limitation. When is this contest to take place? Asked Jin. The director consulted his pad again. Both parties have agreed to tomorrow at midday. The Admiral has requested the use of the Union Fleet's tactical simulator. Commander Russell has agreed to all technical parameters. This will be a spectacle, Drell groaned. Every diplomat on the station will want to observe. Actually, the director corrected, both parties have agreed the simulation will be conducted privately, with only council members as witnesses. The results will be announced publicly afterward. Tella's glow brightened slightly in surprise. The human agreed to that? No audience? His exact words were, "This isn't theater. It's about setting the record straight." As the council continued deliberating logistics, Jack Russell sat alone in his quarters, eyes closed, mentally reviewing everything he remembered about the day Maria Flores died. He wasn't worried about the simulation. He'd lived through the real thing. What concerned him more was what would happen afterward. Win or lose, he had just made humanity's introduction to galactic politics considerably more dramatic than intended. But some things were worth fighting for. Some people were worth defending, even after they were gone. Especially after they were gone. The Union Fleet's tactical simulator was a marvel of technology, a spherical chamber 30 meters in diameter, lined with neural interface nodes that could create immersive scenarios indistinguishable from reality. It was typically used to train fleet commanders for combat situations too dangerous or resource-intensive to practice in real space. Today, it would host a very different kind of battle. Jack arrived precisely on time, dressed in his standard duty uniform, rather than the formal attire from the reception. He nodded respectfully to the council members seated in the observation gallery above the simulator entrance. Admiral Vrax K'Thorn arrived 3 minutes later, his blue scales polished to a reflective sheen, all 4 arms adorned with the insignia of his many campaigns. "Commander Russell," he acknowledged with minimal courtesy. "Admiral," Jack replied simply. The Tyrellian station director stepped forward, visibly uncomfortable with his ceremonial role. "Per Section 17 protocols, I will now review the terms of this challenge." He activated an official datapad. Admiral Vrax K'Thorn, as the challenge party, has selected a tactical simulation recreating the Krell incursion at Proxima Centauri colony, that specifically the engagement involving Lieutenant Maria Flores, Commander Jack Russell, as the challenging party, has set as victory condition that Admiral K'Thorn acknowledge publicly that his assessment of Lieutenant Flores was made without complete information and therefore cannot be considered definitive. The director looked up nervously. "Both parties confirmed these terms?" "We confirmed," Vrax said curtly. "We confirmed," echoed Jack. "The simulation parameters have been verified by 3 independent tactical experts," continued the director. "They have certified that the scenario accurately recreates the conditions, resources, and threat level present during the actual incident." Jack's expression didn't change, but internally he noted the careful wording. Accurately recreating conditions wasn't the same as understanding what it felt like to be there. "The council will observe but not intervene," the director concluded. "Both participants will enter the simulator simultaneously but will experience the scenario from different positions. Admiral K'Thorn will command from the Tactical Operations Center Recreation. Commander Russell will command from the bridge recreation of Lieutenant Flores' vessel." A subtle but clever twist, Jack realized. Vrax had ensured that he would have the advantage of the command center's resources and overview, but while Jack would be limited to a single ship's perspective just as Maria had been. "You may enter when ready," the director finished, stepping aside. The simulator portal dilated open, revealing a shimmering field of blue energy. Vrax stepped toward it, then paused, turning to Jack. "This challenge is unnecessary, Commander," he said, almost conversationally. "Your emotional attachment is admirable but misplaced. There is no shame in acknowledging tactical error." Jack met his gaze steadily. "No, there isn't. I look forward to your acknowledgement after the simulation." Something like surprise flickered across Vrax's alien features before he turned and stepped through the portal. Jack followed moments later, the energy field enveloping him in a tingling sensation. When his vision cleared, he was standing on the bridge of the U.S. Defiant, Maria Flores ship. The simulation was perfect, from the faint smell of recycled air to the subtle vibration of the engines beneath his feet. The bridge crew, all simulations based on the actual personnel, looked to him expectantly. On the main view screen, the Proxima Centauri colony gleamed against the backdrop of space, its orbital habitats forming a loose ring around the main settlement. "Sir," reported the communications officer, "we're receiving distress calls from the colony. Krell vessels have been detected entering the system. Jack took a deep breath. Unlike Vrax, he knew exactly what was coming. Red alert, he ordered. Shields up. Notify all civilian vessels to seek shelter behind the planet. And get me a direct line to whoever's in charge of colony evacuation. On the other side of the simulation, Vrax K'Thorn stood in a recreation of Fleet Command's Tactical Operations Center. Holographic displays showed multiple perspectives of the system, fleet assets, and threat assessments. Admiral, reported a simulated officer, used Defiant reports Krell vessels approaching Proxima Colony. Estimated time to weapons range, 6 minutes. Vrax studied the tactical display with confident efficiency, ordered Defiant to hold position at the colony's far orbit. Direct the civilian ships to use the planet for cover while we bring in reinforcements from Sector 7. Sir, the officer replied, Sector 7 reinforcements are currently responding to a distress call in the Tau Ceti system. Estimated arrival time, 43 minutes. Vrax frowned. This detail hadn't been in his original analysis. Nearest alternative assets? Nothing within 30 minutes, sir. The Admiral's 4 eyes narrowed. A complication, but not insurmountable. Instruct Defiant to engage delaying tactics. Prioritize civilian evacuation. Back on the Defiant's bridge, Jack was already facing the situation's grim reality. Colony reports 3,000 civilians in the orbital habitats, his executive officer reported. Evacuation vessels are launching but need at least 20 minutes to reach minimum safe distance. We don't have 20 minutes, Jack said quietly. On the tactical display, 5 Krell warships had appeared, their distinctive wedge-shaped hulls bristling with weapons. The Krell were notoriously efficient predators with no interest in negotiation or mercy. Sir, the tactical officer called out, Fleet Command orders us to engage in delaying tactics while prioritizing civilian evacuation. Jack almost smiled. Of course Vrax would give that order. It sounded reasonable, responsible, and by the book. It was also completely inadequate for what they were facing. Open a channel to Fleet Command, Jack ordered. The view screen shifted to show Vrax in the Tactical Operations Center. Admiral, Jack said formally, request permission to execute Maneuver Flores 7. There was a brief pause as Vrax processed this unexpected development. There is no such recognized maneuver in the tactical database, Commander. No, sir. There isn't, Jack agreed. Because Maria Flores invented it during this engagement. Permission to proceed? Vrax's scales darkened slightly. Denied. Adhere to standard delaying protocols while we await reinforcements. With respect, Admiral, Jack replied, standard protocols will result in the loss of all civilian lives in the orbital habitats. The Krell will destroy them before the evacuation can be completed. Your assessment is noted, Commander. Follow orders. The communication terminated. Jack turned to his bridge crew. Prepare to execute Maneuver Flores 7. And someone make sure our logs transmit in real time to Fleet Command. In the Tactical Operations Center, Vrax watched with growing concern as the Defiant broke formation and accelerated directly toward the approaching Krell vessels. What is he doing? Vrax demanded. Re-establish communication. The Defiant is not responding, sir, reported his communications officer. They appear to be on an intercept course with the lead Krell vessel. Vrax's tactical mind raced through the possibilities. A direct confrontation was suicide. The Defiant was outgunned 5-1. Then he saw it. The Defiant wasn't targeting the Krell ships directly. It was aiming for the space between them, its trajectory calculated to draw their fire away from the colony's orbital habitats. Clever, Vrax murmured, but insufficient. On the Defiant, Jack stood calmly as his ship accelerated toward almost certain destruction. Sir, the tactical officer reported. Krell vessels adjusting course to intercept. They're taking the bait. Good, Jack nodded. Divert auxiliary power to forward shields. Prepare to execute emergency warp jump on my mark. The bridge crew exchanged nervous glances. Emergency warp jumps within a planetary system were extremely dangerous and violated multiple safety protocols. Commander, the helmsman said hesitantly. Regulations specifically prohibit. I'm aware of regulations, Jack cut him off. Maria was too. She made her choice anyway. The ship shuddered as the first Krell weapons fire struck their shields. Shield integrity at 87%, reported the tactical officer. Hold course, Jack ordered. Let them focus entirely on us. In the tactical center, Vrax watched with growing disbelief as the Defiant absorbed punishment that should have sent it retreating. Instead, the human ship pressed forward, drawing all 5 Krell vessels into a tight pursuit formation. This is suicide, Vrax muttered, before ordering, open a channel to the Defiant. Still no response, sir. On the Defiant's bridge, systems were beginning to overload. Sparks erupted from a secondary console as another volley from the Krell fleet hammered their shields. Shield integrity at 41%, the tactical officer reported tensely. Status of civilian evacuation? Jack asked, his voice remarkably steady. 8 more minutes required for complete evacuation, sir. Jack nodded. We need to give them those 8 minutes. Prepare for emergency warp jump. Target coordinates, directly above the system's sun. The bridge fell silent. Sir, the navigator finally said, those coordinates will place us within the solar corona. Even with shields, we'll have less than 2 minutes before critical systems failure. I'm counting on the Krell following us, Jack explained. Their ships have better armor but poorer heat dissipation than ours. We'll last 2 minutes. They'll last about 40 seconds. Understanding dawned on the officers' faces. It was brilliant, desperate, and almost certainly fatal for the Defiant. The Krell are gaining, sir, reported Tactical. Shield integrity at 27%. Navigator, Jack ordered. Execute jump. The stars on the view screen blurred momentarily before being replaced by the blindingly bright surface of Proxima Centauri's sun, filling the entire view. Alarms immediately blared throughout the ship as temperature readings soared beyond safety parameters. Confirm Krell pursuit, Jack commanded. Confirmed, sir. All 5 vessels followed our jump signature. They're firing again. In the Tactical Operations Center, Vrax stared at the displays in disbelief. The Defiant had just executed one of the most reckless, desperate, and tactically unorthodox maneuvers he'd ever witnessed, jumping to the corona of a star and luring the entire Krell attack force with it. Genius, he whispered, almost involuntarily. Sir, asked his confused aide. The human Vrax's voice was uncharacteristically subdued. He knew the Krell hunting instinct would override their tactical judgment. They couldn't resist pursuing what they perceived as wounded prey. On the displays, the Krell ships were indeed following the Defiant into the solar corona, their weapons still firing despite the rapidly deteriorating conditions. Temperature approaching critical levels on all Krell vessels, reported a tactical analyst. Their systems are failing faster than the Defiant's, just as Commander Russell predicted. And the evacuation? Vrax asked. Proceeding unhindered, sir. Estimated completion in 6 minutes. On the Defiant, conditions were deteriorating rapidly. The environmental systems struggled against the immense heat penetrating the shields, and several consoles had already shut down to prevent overload. Shield integrity at 12%, Tactical reported, voice strained, all temperature approaching critical levels. Jack gripped the command chair as the ship shuddered violently. Status of Krell vessels? 3 have lost propulsion, sir. The other 2 are attempting to retreat. Not an option for them now, Jack said grimly. Navigation. Calculate emergency jump coordinates back to Proxima Colony. We'll need to time this perfectly. The navigator worked frantically. Coordinates set, but sir, our warp drive is showing signs of imminent failure. We only need it once more, Jack said. On my mark, 3, 2, 1, jump. The Defiant vanished in a flash of light, leaving the 5 Krell vessels trapped in the solar corona. Moments later, their hulls began to rupture as their cooling systems failed completely. Back in orbit around Proxima Centauri, the Defiant rematerialized with a violent shudder. Multiple systems were offline, and acrid smoke filled the bridge. Damage report, Jack ordered, steadying himself against his chair. Critical failures in propulsion, weapons, and life support, his XO reported. But we're alive, sir. And the evacuation? Completed just moments ago. All civilians clear. Jack allowed himself a small smile, just as she did it. In the Tactical Operations Center simulation, Admiral Vrax K'Thorn stood motionless, watching as the Defiant somehow survived its suicidal gambit. The data was unmistakable. All 5 Krell vessels destroyed, civilian population saved, with only one Union vessel pushed far beyond its design limits. Simulation complete, announced the system's neutral voice. Historical outcome replicated with 99.7% accuracy. The blue energy field surrounding Vrax dissolved, returning him to the reality of the simulator chamber. Across from him stood Jack Russell, looking exactly as he had when they'd entered, composed and certain. The Turellian director approached nervously. The challenge parameters have been met. The simulation accurately recreated Lieutenant Flores' tactical decisions during the Krell incursion. The gallery of council members watched expectantly as Vrax stepped forward. His 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of deep contemplation among his species. I have witnessed the full tactical scenario, Vrax began formally. My previous assessment was made without access to certain critical perspectives. He paused, scales shifting through several shades of blue. Commander Russell, I acknowledge that Lieutenant Maria Flores acted with exceptional tactical insight under circumstances that defied conventional doctrine. Her decision to lure the Krell into the solar corona represented innovative thinking that saved thousands of lives. Jack remained silent, allowing the Admiral's words to stand uncontested. The citation will be amended, Vrax continued. Lieutenant Flores' posthumous commendation will reflect that her actions, while unorthodox, demonstrated the highest traditions of fleet service. A murmur passed through the council gallery. However, Vrax added, his tone sharpening slightly, I maintain that such tactics represent an unacceptable risk profile for standard fleet operations. The Flores maneuver will be documented as an emergency protocol only, to be considered when all conventional options have failed. Jack nodded. That's all Lieutenant Flores would have wanted, Admiral. Recognition that sometimes the rulebook must yield to the moment. Vrax regarded him with newfound respect. You were her instructor at the academy. Yes, and I taught her to follow protocol until following it costs more lives than breaking it. The Admiral stepped closer. You knew she would attempt this maneuver. That's why you were so certain of the outcome. I knew Maria, Jack replied simply. And I knew she understood the Krell better than anyone in that tactical room. Their predator's pursuit is instinctive for them. She used that against them. At the cost of her own life, Vrax observed. The real Defiant didn't make it back from the corona, Jack acknowledged, the first crack appearing in his professional demeanor. Maria knew that was likely when she gave the order. Vrax extended one of his forearms in the traditional greeting of equals, a gesture he had pointedly withheld at the reception. Your student honored your teachings, Commander, and you have honored her memory. Jack clasped the offered arm. Thank you, Admiral. As they exited the simulator chamber together, the council members filing out behind them, Vrax spoke again. The Flores maneuver will be included in advanced tactical training. Her name will be remembered. Jack smiled faintly. She once told me she didn't care about being remembered, only about getting the job done when it mattered most. Then she succeeded twice over, Vrax replied. They paused at the corridor junction where their paths would diverge. The reception continues for another hour, the Admiral noted. I believe they're serving that Terran beverage you humans value so highly. Whiskey, Jack supplied. Yes, perhaps we could continue this discussion over a glass? I find I have much to learn about human tactical intuition. Jack nodded, something like peace finally settling over his features. Maria would have liked that, Admiral. She always said the best lessons happen after the formal training ends. Together, they walked toward the reception hall. a commander who had lost his finest student, and an admiral who had gained a new perspective, united in respect for a lieutenant who had sacrificed everything to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. Above them, through the station's observation dome, Proxima Centauri shone bright and undimmed, just as Maria Flores had ensured it would remain.